Week in History with Mike and Will. That's Will.
And that's Mike.
And it's This Week in History.
Yeah.
And what we do is every week, Will looks up a thing that happened in this week in history, does some research with his little mind, and books and other things, and then he comes back here. He's got 1 hour to explain it to me. 1 hour to explain it.
Here is the hourglass. Sorry, we didn't set our props.
Sometimes it's things I know, sometimes it's things I don't know anything about. Usually I don't know anything about it. And you get to learn along with me.
Yep.
Boy, what fun.
Yep.
All right.
Although, quick little point of order. I got the date wrong originally for this one.
Oh.
So technically, it was, I thought it was May 13th. It was April 13th. But we're going to do it anyway because I already did the research on it and said I wanted to do it. And it's a really cool event.
Okay.
So we're just going to do it anyway. So I guess next year, when we come back around, we'll do something really cool for the week of May 13th.
Okay.
Just
in
saying.
the meantime, welcome to last month, month in history.
Last month, this month in history.
All right. So what we are discussing
my fault.
this week, today, whenever you're watching this,
Yep.
is the duel on Ganryu Island.
Yes.
April 13th?
April 13th.
April 13th.
Technically.
1612.
1612, yes.
All right. All right, you got 1 hour, Will.
I got 1 hour. I got
Ready?
the timer. Ready, sir. All right. Ganryu Island is in Japan, just so we're clear. So these names will be Japanese, and I will try not to butcher any of them, but no promises because not a fluent Japanese speaker. So, I mean, no disrespect. If I get any of the pronunciations wrong and you care or you know better, correct me, please. I like hearing when I do something wrong. I can make a correction I learned. But I did look up some pronunciations to make sure I got them right.
I preemptively don't forgive you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, Miyamoto... I already screwed it up.
Man.
Screwed up the first name. And this one I actually can pronounce.
Syllable.
Miyamoto Musashi was born in 1584 in either Mimasaka or Harima Province in Japan. Not really sure what, because his early life is not super well recorded. He didn't really know because he was a baby. So he didn't write a ton about that. And just to be clear, a lot of our sources are from Miyamoto himself, or we'll just call him Musashi. That's what everybody called him.
Okay.
So there's some bias, maybe. The other sources are almost all his students. So there's worse bias from them because of the hero worship and the cult of personality.
Yeah,
right?
and their grades and finals.
Yeah, exactly. But there are a lot of other historians that corroborate this, and then other histories that were written at the time.
Okay.
So I will, when it's not totally clear what he did, I will point out that there were debates about the exact accuracy. But I just want to be clear that, as with all things historical, we have to look at our sources. He's a great source because he wrote a lot of detailed stuff. He wrote several books, so we get that. But again, it's kind of like whenever you talk about autobiographical stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a spoonful of salt, not just a grain.
Sure. I'm sure he's his own hero.
He might. He's actually pretty modest about his accomplishments, but he, is saying, "I did all these things." So just have to go with that. So he was born then. His father was Shinmen Munisai. That's what he went by. His actual name was Miyamoto. Blah, 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 blah. But this is what he was known as. He earned the title, basically.
Which is the title?
The Shinmen clan. Okay. He was such a loyal retainer, they let him take the clan name, which is a big deal. He was a martial artist, and he's practitioner of the jit, which is right here. Now, a jit has a long, solid prong and then a smaller prong that cuts off of it. It looks like a big, mean tuning fork almost. And it was used to catch
tune you up.
Kinda, yeah, that's where the expression comes from.
Okay.
No, what it was used for is it's actually kind of a law enforcement tool to disarm unruly samurai. You'd catch the blade in this little hook part and then twist it and pop the sword out of their hand without having to murder anybody.
So is this thing sharp then? Is this
It's
also
no,
used as a
typically
weapon?
no. I mean,
Is it
it's
defensive
metal,
weapon?
so you whack somebody with it. It's like a club.
But is a defensive weapon?
But it's mostly a defensive weapon.
Okay.
I mean, as with anything that is a heavy enough stick, you can still hit somebody with
Yeah.
it. So he was a master of this style. So good that eventually he got to the attention of the shogun. The shogun is the military leader of Japan. They run everything. Even though there was an emperor at the time, he was largely powerless, just kind of a figurehead.
No.
The shoguns at this point were the Ashikaga shogunate. They were like the last shoguns for a big chunk of history.
Chicago?
Ashikaga. Chicago. So yeah, but with an they had a clan that like trained their soldiers and their family. They were the Yoshioka. The Yoshioka had been doing this for a long time. They since the 12th century were like the sword masters who trained the shoguns. They trained different daimyo, different powerful lords within the samurai caste system. So they're very well respected. And along comes this kind of unknown Munisai guy, and he's like, I can beat them.
Mm.
So he challenges their main teacher, their main trainer.
Show me your biggest guy.
Basically, and
First,
he wins.
First day in prison
Yep.
rule too.
And typically they do these are supposed to be non-lethal because if you kill the other guy, then there's no trainer, so you don't want to kill the trainer.
Sure.
And it can also be a test of skill to do as much damage as possible without having to kill anybody.
But it's gotta be tough to be a teacher on the first day of class.
I can kick your butt.
Everyone says that.
Everyone says that. All right, line up. Let's do it. Yeah.
Because after the fourth guy, you're like, maybe they could.
Yeah.
I'm getting tired.
Yeah, he's getting tired. We can beat him. That's the problem, though, is if you're the fifth guy, you're like, he just crushed four guys. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. Don't kill me.
Okay.
Whack. So he fights Yoshioka's best guy, or I think it was their instructor. Typically, it would be the instructor versus instructor fight. And he beats him in 2 out of 3 matches. So the shogun says, all right, well, you guys aren't my teachers anymore. This guy is.
Oh.
So hundreds of years of tradition and achievement, pew, gone. He gives him the title of Unrivaled Under the Sun, which is a pretty cool title.
I guess. Just for winning 2 out of 3 fights?
Just winning 2 out of 3 fights.
Did he lose one of the 3 fights then?
It was
or they just didn't do the third one?
He lost one. It was, I win, you win, I win.
That's hardly unrivaled under the sun.
Exactly. Like
It's
you
rivaled
beat him
at least once.
You rival him once, but not twice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just how they had. Well, and this builds enmity. So this clan is like, look, we beat him once, but not twice.
Okay. Best 2 out of 3.
Best 2 out of 3.
Best 4 out of 5.
Yep. Best. No. Best 6 out of 10.
I don't know. I don't know the numbers.
Yeah, I don't know how it goes. It just starts getting crazy after a while. 4 out of 7. No, they don't do that. They lose, and they're kind of dishonored by this, so they're crabby, understandably, because they've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
So eventually, Munisai has Musashi as his son, and he's raised to be like, ooh, sword fighting's pretty cool.
Sure.
They're samurai, so they have a sense of responsibility. They're allowed to use weapons and train in different martial arts. They have a little more privilege than the average folk, and they've got a little bit of land. Now, because Musashi sees his dad as kind of as unrivaled under the sun, he's already earned this title by the time Musashi's born, and he's like, oh, well, I want to do that.
I want to be also unrivaled.
Now, according to multiple sources kind of converging to make this story, but specifically Musashi, is his first duel was at the age of 13, and he won.
According to him.
According to a few more details. Now, all we get from Musashi is he just says, my first duel was at 13, and it was against Arima Kihei, and that's all he says, really. He's like, I fought him, I beat him, and I killed him. Because most duels at this time were to the death.
At 13?
At 13. Now, here's where the story gets cool, because this is part of, I think, the Niten, which is his fighting style, but it's one of his students wrote this, was that Arima Kihei came to the area and basically posted a challenge on a board and said, anybody who wants to take me on,
take a number.
Come and get it. So 13-year-old kid goes up and he's like, Musashi, you write your name and where you're going to be. So then the guy goes to where Musashi is, and he's at this temple. He's like, you're a little student there challenging me to fight. I'm going to kill him. And the priest is like, no, he's a kid. He's dumb. He doesn't know what he's saying. And he says, well, if he wants to back out of the duel, he has to come and like bow to the ground and put his head in the dirt and say he screwed up and he's an idiot.
Yeah.
Well, Musashi's like, I'm not doing that. I'm 13 and apparently have an attitude.
Yeah, well, have you met a 13-year-old recently?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Musashi, armed with a stick, basically, he has
And an attitude.
He has a bow, which is just a staff.
Yep.
Charges the guy, knocks him to the ground, and beats him to death with a stick.
Not a duel.
That's not really that's what we call a murder.
Yeah.
Now, in a wonderful film series that's about this, starring the legendary Toshiro Mifune, who's one of my favorite Japanese actors, he plays Musashi, and Musashi's like outlawed over this and all this other stuff. But according to like the actual sources, that doesn't happen. The idiot made a challenge and he lost.
It's true.
That's
He did say anyone who could beat me. No more details.
It wasn't considered a really formal duel, so it's kind of legally sketchy. Plus, he's a kid. And even at that time, they're like, you're a child. Like, the law's a little dicey on this.
Okay. Well, he obviously got away with it.
Yeah. When he was 15, he decided he was going to go on his Musha Shugyo, which is a training in warriorship. So the Europeans did something similar to this. They called it errantry, where the knights would go around and fight and either go to tournaments or just serve various lords and masters in wars. So that's what a lot
Get some numbers on the board.
Yeah, so a lot of samurai did this. They needed practical world experience, and you didn't get it as much if you just sat at home.
True.
And trained. You had to get like hand-to-hand combat experience, face-to-face stuff, duels, sometimes joining the militaries, because people always need another sword. So he decides at 15 he's going to do this. That's not too irregular at the time to be young like that and go out into the world.
Plus, he's already a stone-cold killer.
He's already a stone-cold killer. Now, at 16, Tadashima Akiyama, basically, I think having heard of his, he's this upstart kid who killed a guy at 13, formally challenges him to a duel. And Musashi kills him. So it doesn't go
like right there.
Like,
the challenge.
no, they do it. They do the whole proper duel. So this one's like, the first one was his first duel. This is like his first like proper open public duel. Okay. The other one was kind of just like
street fight.
Yeah, that was more of a street fight. This is more of an organized event that observes the proper rites and rituals. And Musashi kills him. Now Musashi again doesn't have a ton of schooling on it. He's been training his whole life probably because he's like, oh, Dad's cool, but his father didn't like pass on his style to him. Oh. So he's doing his own thing.
Not genetic either?
It might be some genetics. I mean, if your dad's the unrivaled under the sun.
Sure.
Unrivaled in 2 out of 3 months.
I'm just going to guess style is not genetic.
Correct. But general, like, skill maybe. Like, natural talent. Yeah, kid's got talent. Now, in 1600, so Musashi would have been about 16 at this point, there was the Battle of Sekigahara, which we talked about in a previous episode. And this was
Check that out on previous episodes, folks.
Heck yeah, it's a good one. Basically a climactic battle to determine who rules all of Japan. The Ashikaga shogunate had fallen. There was no shogun at the time. Various powers were rising up and fighting. There was a fellow named Oda Nobunaga who was considered the great unifier, and then he died. Then there was Hideyoshi Toyotomi, who he died. And then eventually Ieyasu Tokugawa becomes shogun of shoguns. He's the boss. But that's a little later on in the story. So it's thought that maybe because this was such a big event and basically every young samurai wanted to be a part of it, that he was involved in the battle. If he was on the losing side, which wasn't great. So even if you are a pretty good swordsman at 16, you're not turning the tide. Yeah. But there aren't any records that specifically say he was there. And he's kind of mum on the subject. So he might have been there.
Especially if they lost.
Yeah, he might have been there. It might have been a smaller battlefield role. But it does very much make sense that the biggest battle in Japan at the time would have pulled in any samurai who's trying to make a name for himself. So he was maybe involved in that, but we're not positive. In 1604, the Yoshioka clan comes back.
Hey,
they are really mad at Musashi and his family. So they're like, they want to kill him. specifically him. They're like, well, your dad sucks, so you need to die too.
Oh.
So he's in Kyoto at this time during his travels, and that's where their main dojo is. And they challenge him to a series of duels. He fights 3 duels within a couple of days, and kills 3 guys, like pretty quickly.
Wow. It would suck to be the 3rd guy.
It really would. You're like, this isn't going great. It's in different locations. So like one's at the dojo, one's like just outside the city, and then one is in a pine forest nearby. So they're trying different ways of killing him.
Sure. That's how you'd want to do it for the movie too.
Change the scene. Yep.
Yeah.
And in Legends, like they were going to assassinate him and they were going to jump him and kill him, but he figured out about it and then challenged them before they could do it. He's like, "You guys are going to kill me? Bring it on. Let's do this officially." And they're like, "Oh crap." So there's a lot of legends that bounce around it, but we do know that he fought these 3 guys, he killed these 3 guys, and it basically broke the back of their clan because they were like, "We sent our best duelists to kill you, and he killed you pretty fast."
Now our best is Dwayne, and
Yeah.
Dwayne sucks.
Dwayne in accounting, he's not so good at fighting.
He's our best now.
I don't want to fight him. He just killed the other 3, like, poop, pa, pa. What am I going to do?
Screw up his taxes.
That's what exactly where my head was. I was like, something with taxes. It's the only thing certain in life are death and taxes, and I'm going to die.
Dwayne,
I'm going to die.
Poor Dwayne.
So seeing how pathetic Dwayne was as a swordsman, Musashi's just like, can you do my taxes? He's like, I have a weird income. I just kind of travel and fight.
Sure, yeah.
It's kind of a gig-based economy thing. Can you help me with that?
Yeah.
And Dwayne's like, sure, yeah, I'll help you. And he's like, oh, cool. So the Yoshioka clan becomes, Musashi's tax guys.
Oh.
And to this day.
Really?
No. But that would be great.
I
That
don't
would be
know
a
when
really...
When we left actual history.
Sometime after Dwayne was mentioned, because that is not a Japanese
There is
name.
no Dwayne.
There is no Dwayne.
It's not pronounced Dwayne.
In 1607, Munasai, Musashi's dad, passes his formal teachings on to his son. It's like, now you're of the age where you can not just know the techniques, but you can master them. So Musashi's like 23, 24 at this time.
Go get him.
And he knows his own kind of hodgepodge style that he's putting together and his dad's specialist
secret recipe
style. I couldn't find any point where Musashi actually uses his dad's style.
No, but it could.
But there are techniques within it. All martial arts have useful bits and pieces in them. Any decent martial art has good bits that you can pick out of it and go, oh, I could use that thing, and I can use that thing, and I can use this thing. And Musashi was a big believer in fighting people with different styles because he wanted to know how useful his techniques were against everything.
Oh, okay.
Not just sword to sword. So eventually, while doing this, he meets a guy named Shishido. We don't actually know his full name.
But that's Shishido.
But this is considered a possibly legendary and mythical event that did not happen. But there are a few sources that do talk about it. And it's an interesting story. It's not anything crazy. Okay. But he fought against this Shishido character, and it's kind of just a footnote in the histories. But it's interesting because of the guy's weapon of choice. Ooh. He uses what's called a Kusari Gama, which is featured here in a picture, and I'm going to explain it as well.
Kusari Gama.
What that means is chain and sickle. So it's like a handheld sickle that would be used to harvest rice with a chain attached to it and a big weight on the end. And the idea of it was you'd use the chain to try to wrap up the enemy's weapon and close in and hack them to pieces with a kama. That's this sickle.
Yeah.
It's a vicious weapon, but it's horrible in battlefield situations. You cannot whip this chain around. It takes up way too much space. It's not a good battlefield weapon, but it's a really effective way to fight a swordsman. It's not great against a spear because the weapon's too long and they can just poke you while you're flailing this thing around. But the advantage of having this chain gives you reach, and you can try to entangle your opponent. You can use the weight to strike. You can coil up the chain around your arm or your wrist to use as like an armor or a defensive technique. Yeah. And then the kama is really sharp and has a piercing point, so you can even go through armor. So an individual one-on-one fight, it's super useful. The weapon was used by ninja very commonly. So it's also kind of thought that maybe this guy was a member of a ninja clan.
Oh.
Because he doesn't really give a formal name. So he could have just been like, I'm a swordsman.
Yeah.
That's who I am.
Ninjas are sneaky.
And the ninjas, so the reason why it's a very strong possibility that he was a ninja is the Kusari Gama is based on peasant tools. The kama is like a sickle. It's just used for harvesting. It's not an overt weapon.
Yeah.
And the ninja,
Of course, the ball and chain.
the ball and chain added on is
classic.
That changes it.
Sheep herding.
Move. Shink.
Meh.
Now that sheep is dead.
Oh boy.
So it's thought that, and it wasn't necessarily that the ninja invented it, but they definitely utilized the weapon because you're just a farmer going around minding your own business, cutting your field down, and you're suddenly armed to the teeth. This is a lethal weapon.
Yeah.
And that was a very common thing for the ninja to do, was to have like a household item that didn't seem necessarily like a professional martial weapon, and suddenly it's a super deadly tool in their hands. It also has multiple other uses that you can use, like a chain for like climbing and things like that. So it's multi-use, multi-purpose, I guess is the proper term.
Okay.
Multi-purpose. It's a useful tool, but again, also not good in a battlefield situation. And the ninja did not typically fight. They didn't use their tactics in battle.
Right.
That's a one-on-one. That's an infiltration thing. So in a duel, this weapon was considered particularly useful, and it's flashy and cool looking. So samurai who had like their own dojo would use this to attract students. They're like, look how cool this thing is. It's all spinny and flashy and
cool.
Basically, they'd go to like a fair and demonstrate the technique, and people are like, I want to do that. I want to be his student.
Yeah.
And then they show up and like, teach me that thing. You're like, oh, well, okay, we can do this.
This is more of a third-year thing.
Yep, you got to pay. You got to work your way up. Now, Musashi fights this guy. Same result as all his other duels so far. Kills him.
Yeah.
Now, at some point along this path in his life, Musashi starts to develop his own fighting style.
Oh.
Typically,
Got to trademark that.
yes. Now, at this time, samurai carried typically 3 blades. They carried a tanto, which is a short knife, a wakizashi, which is a short sword, and the katana, which is the killing sword. It's a 2-handed bladed weapon. Most katanas only have like a 2-foot, like 2.5-foot blade. It's not super long.
Okay.
Because you have to be able to draw it quickly, use it fast, but it's curved, so it has this very strong cutting power. And because it's a 2-handed weapon, you have all of your strength behind it. You use the whole body to cut, so you can slash through armor, you can stab with it. It's a very, very useful weapon. And it also only has one sharpened edge, so you can brace against the back of the blade, and it's got a ton of utility.
Yes.
But typically when fighting, you only used the katana.
Yeah.
The wakizashi is like ceremonial. Everybody carries that. Every samurai is carrying it. And it's considered kind of like this, like if you're going to commit seppuku, kill yourself, you typically use the wakizashi. You can't use the bigger sword for it. And
not without help.
Right. This is very much the symbol of rank. It's typically not used as a weapon though. It's used as like a last ditch. I lost my katana, crap. Wakizashi, crap. Tanto, which is a little stabby knife. That's much more of a tool.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't use like a wakizashi as a tool. That's not what it's for. That's like a huge disrespect thing of using a sword as a tool. You don't do that. Like you don't like cut things with it. You cut people and that's it. It's a whole thing.
Sure.
But nobody used 2 swords at the same time.
Well, katana's 2-handed, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Musashi decided, this is stupid. I have 2 swords. I should use 2 swords.
All right.
So he would bounce between using like twin katanas sometimes. But typically, since he was always carrying what's called the daisho, which is the 2-sword set, he trained himself to use both at the same time. Which really threw off his opponents because they're like, this weird. Now, I only have 1 weapon and you have 2 weapons.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you have a lot more strength behind each cut with a 2-handed sword, but you don't need a ton of strength to kill somebody. It only takes so much pressure to go stab and put it into a person. And typically, duels were fought between unarmored people.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's like if you're cutting a piece of bread with a sharp knife, and it's not hard to like cut your own hand.
Yeah.
And being cut hurts. So Musashi's like, well, I don't need the most strength, but I need this versatility. I can change my footing. I have weapons in different directions. They don't know where I'm coming from, and I can just rain down hits, and they're not really prepared for it. It's also considered, because it's so weird, it's off-putting. Like, his opponent's like, I don't understand why you
don't care for this at all.
2 swords and I don't like it. I don't know what to defend against. I don't know what to strike against. He also very strongly believed in every move is an attack. So even defensively, you should be positioning the blade in a way that the other guy's going to hurt himself.
Ooh.
So instead of like, the movies always show like, sword to sword and it takes 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But he would try to do things where it's like move out of the way and slash at the same time, mixing different moves together. This is not like exclusive to him. A lot of samurai believed every move is a killing stroke, like every strike.
Sure.
So they trained all day, every day, if you were an actual combat samurai, to cut and kill.
Every day.
And that was their thing.
Every cut.
Every cut. So every cut should be able to cleave a person and cut them down. They trained on how to cut bone. They had these very strong striking styles. They would cut bamboo with the sword to practice. No, typically it's not for a tool. That's different. This is training. That's okay.
Yeah. You could double up, though, I bet.
You probably. They're like, so this is technically for training, but now we have all this cut bamboo, so...
Measure twice.
Cut once!
Kill it once.
Now we can build a house.
Okay, good.
I mean, incidentally,
lots of training. Wow.
We just don't want to waste any of this.
Who would want to
bamboo.
waste it?
We're not wasteful. Everything is useful.
I'm not sure how much justifying they have to do.
I don't think they have to do any. It depends on who. Like, if you're the
Who's
daimyo,
asking?
no justification. If you're the samurai, to the daimyo, justify. To the peasant, do your job.
There you go.
The peasant, okay. There's a hierarchy of justification. So he's developing this technique. It's been called now the Niten Ichiru, which that means like 2-sword style.
Oh,
and
okay.
And it was
The old 2-sword style.
the 2-sword style. It's very unique. In some of his fights, like I said, he didn't always use a blade. Sometimes he used what's called a bokken, which is just a wooden sword. It's a training sword, but you can kill somebody with it if you're good, which he does multiple times in his... Well, the first guy he killed was with a stick.
Well, that's
so he's like, oh, this is deadly. Whack! But if you take a hardwood sword-shaped object that weighs a couple of pounds and you crack somebody over the head, you can kill them. Or if you break bones, they can get infected. And if you just keep hitting somebody like that, blunt force trauma will kill you. So these guys were trained killers, and there are no toy swords in Japan. Everything, like, I can kill you with this. I got this pen. I can kill you with this. I got this cup. That can kill you. I got bread. That won't kill you. I could use a whole loaf and choke you with it.
There you go.
Now it's
Thinking outside the box there.
There you go. You have to be creative.
Thinking outside the bread box.
Meanwhile, the ninja are like, why don't you just use poison? You can kill with anything, man. And the samurai like, it's dishonorable. You can't do that. And the ninja like, if I win, it doesn't matter.
Who's going to tell?
Who's going to tell? No, you'll be dead. Haha. So.
Wood sword.
Wood sword, yeah. So
Not
in
wood
some
sword.
of his, so we have a picture of him. There we go. Using 2 bokken that are the same size. So he did use the same length sword too. It wasn't just, a katana and a wakizashi. It was 2 katanas. He was just kind of this whirling dervish of death, and people are like, I don't know how to deal with that. This is not cool. So he's developing this technique, and he gets more and more famous. Now, in 1608, he faces off against Muso Gonosuke. Now, Gonosuke is one of his most legendary duels because this guy was considered like a master of the spear. Their fight was considered pretty brutal, but Musashi won in the end, but spared his life. And there's an assumption, and the other thing about this duel is it may not have happened. This is one that, like, a lot of people are like, the dates don't quite line up. And then there was apparently a second duel, but that's even less likely to have actually happened. Like, scholars are like, there's like a 50-50, that didn't happen, that did happen.
Yeah, right.
Because Musashi doesn't, again, go into super detail about that.
He probably lost.
That's the assumption about the second one, is that Musashi lost that one, which would be his only loss. Spoilers. But apparently he fought him, he beat him, he let him live.
Okay.
And they kind of had like a lifelong acquaintance after that, because
Yeah,
you're like,
that's
well,
nice.
we didn't die.
Yeah. It's good to make friends.
But he's building up this fame now. Now he's like close to 30, and he's just been whooping butt since he was 13 years old. And he's starting to teach people. People want to learn from this guy who's going around doing these duels. And he doesn't really settle down much. He doesn't like serve a specific lord for any length of time. Even when he may have fought in Sekigahara, he did not stick to one dude. He was just like, all right, well, I'm here. I fought. Now I'm going over there. Kind of a Ronin type
Is
character.
he then, like, how is he living? How is he, like...
Basically with his sword. He could fight duels and earn money that way, probably. But he might have just been, I'm going to go into town and I'm going to serve as your retainer. As I serve here, defending you, you feed me. Because that was how money worked. Samurai typically didn't touch money.
Yeah.
That wasn't really a thing of theirs. That was a Ronin thing, like the masterless samurai. They had to, but that's considered kind of dishonorable. Merchants touch money.
Oh.
And merchants were part of the lowest strata of society.
Yeah.
They were lower than farmers. They were the same level as Eta almost, where it's their, money's gross. But samurai, the things you need with money are shelter and food, and that's it. So he would just go into these areas, and he would either work at a temple, doing simple chores around it, offer his sword as defense, which is always nice to have at this time period because it's just chaos.
Yeah.
And then he would also go to different dojos and either teach or duel some of their members, and they would put him up basically for the night.
Right.
They're like, well, you're awesome. Come stay with us.
Sure. Thanks for not killing us.
Yep. There were also samurai like that were able to just go, I'm a samurai, feed me. And in some places that worked. So he might have done that.
Okay.
That seems less likely because he would have been just hated and driven out of every town.
Yeah.
And if you win your lodgings by being a swordsman,
At least you're providing something.
yes. So that was also another thing is it's like having a traveling rock star need a place to live. People were like, yeah, you're Musashi, come stay at my house. And he's like, oh, cool, sure.
Yeah.
Tell us your story. And you tell stories, whatever you have to do to get through.
Oh, sure. Sounds nice.
Yeah, it's not such a bad living. Although at the end of the day, he's a killer and he's really good at it. Now, eventually his father, who's still kicking, gets transferred to a different lord and starts working under him as his instructor. And he meets a fellow named Sasaki Kojiro. Now, Sasaki Kojiro is a legendarily famous swordsman at this time. He's a contemporary who is known for being really good with a sword, and his style is he uses what's called a nodachi. Now, a katana is, like we said, like a 2-foot and change blade.
Yeah.
A nodachi is a 3-foot blade or bigger.
Oh.
The largest nodachis are just called odachi, and o means greater, and dachi is kind of a different version of pronunciation for the traditional old school samurai sword, which was a taichi. Tachi is the same as a katana, basically, but the whole thing curves, whereas a katana has like the straight handle and a more subtle curve. So an o-tachi, basically, a big killing sword. It was like it was their equivalent of like a European greatsword. This thing was used so you could fight a guy on horseback from the ground.
Yes,
It's a
horses
huge
are tall.
sword. Yeah, they're very tall, and it was easier to get a big sword to fight somebody on a horse than to get a horse.
Yeah.
It's cheaper. It fell out of fashion in like the 1300s for a while, and then became more of like a dueling thing because it was just so hard to use this giant sword.
Yeah.
And eventually it became a smaller blade.
Yeah, walk around with it.
And actually that was a problem. You can't draw it from the hip because the blade's too big.
Yeah.
So they were literally drawn off the back, which is like, they always see it in the movies now where the guy's got the sword on the back, which they didn't actually do in like Europe. But in Japan, yeah, that's how you carry it. Or they had somebody carry the sword for them and then they draw the blade out from that way.
Sounds like a fun part-time job.
That sucks. Can you be like, that's your job on the battlefield? I'm just holding the sword. Don't kill me.
Careful when you take it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now his was a little different because instead of it having any curve in the blade, it was a straight bladed nodachi. So it looks like a giant machete, basically. And they called it the washing pole because it was like the laundry washing pole because it was so big you could hang, you'd like hang laundry
Oh,
off of it, kind of thing. It was kind of like a pet name for a sword. That was his
Okay.
thing.
It doesn't really strike fear, but
No,
okay.
no, no. But it's kind of that ironic, like, you know, you name this giant bruiser guy like Pearl or like Fluffy,
Yeah.
and then he shows up, you're like, oh crap, you're a giant. So he'd be like, oh yeah, give me the washing pole, and like the what?
Yowza.
Okay then, I don't want to play that game. So it's, you know, it's just this giant straight death sword. And he had a unique style, which we don't know much about, other than it was called the turning swallow cut. So swallows, if you've seen the bird, they dart around in the sky when they're moving quickly. And it's thought that it's because the blade is, the attack was 2 strikes and they changed direction. It was like an overhead strike followed by an upward strike. So just chop, chop.
Yeah.
Now, he was so good with this that he could move and fight with this big, heavy blade like it wasn't anything. So he wound up getting the nickname the Demon of the Western Provinces.
Ooh,
That's a pretty cool nickname.
that's pretty good.
To counter, Musashi does not have a nickname. he's just Musashi. He doesn't really need a nickname. But anytime anybody calls you the demon of anything,
Yeah.
you're probably kind of terrifying, right? Like I said, we don't know
At least unliked.
at least like we just really don't like. He's just kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that this sword technique was fast and lethal. And if you have a big sword that's at least a 3-foot blade, and you're chopping down with that, if you hit anything that you'd strike down that's head or shoulders, you're gonna probably kill somebody. If you then you do a quick up slice, that's gonna disembowel somebody. So you're gonna like cut the head or the shoulder and then slice up, and it was vicious, and people were terrified of it. Because of this, he thinks he's like, I'm the best swordsman around, and also because the Nodachi is tied to the old school Tai Chi sword, which is not Tai Chi like the Chinese martial arts. Tachi. It got a slightly different pronunciation. And it's not related at all.
Okay.
But he sees this as an old and traditional style. And it's kind of like this is traditional Japanese warrior culture versus this newfangled guy who's using 2 swords, which is really weird and dishonorable. And he's trying to, he just does not like Musashi.
Nope, never
So
liked it.
a
2
duel
swords.
is proposed between the two when Musashi comes to visit his dad. His dad does not propose the duel, but either the Lord proposes it, just to stir up some stuff.
Sure.
Kojiro might have proposed it because he's jealous of Musashi's fame and he's the demon of the Western Provinces and ain't
What if
nobody
he
gonna
tried
tell him.
2 of his big swords?
That would be pretty cool. That'd be really cool. I feel like there's a video game that has that where the swords just call out.
Sure. A lot of forearm strength.
Yeah, a lot of everything strength, I think, because that's a lot of stuff. Some of these swords, the biggest Nodachis could weigh almost like 20 pounds. They're colossal.
Yeah, it's big.
Like that's like an anime sword. But yeah, they're huge. His was more modest. His is like a 3-foot blade.
Oh, just
But-
a regular 3. All right.
But with like a 18-inch or 2-foot handle. So it's still like a 5-foot sword. It's a big sword. And the other thought is that the local daimyo, he wasn't a daimyo, but he was a higher lord, wanted to like solidify his political control, and by having this duel between these 2 guys, it would help him like assert his authority, because either the son of his trainer dies, which then he's got to get a new one. So but he's kind of leaning into or Kojiro dies. And if Kojiro dies, that guy's like representative of all these other fighting styles and all these other lords. So it makes the local daimyo look, my guy's better than your guy.
Yeah. All right.
So there's a few reasons why it might have happened. But we do know that this duel happened. So at this point now, Musashi has kind of tempered his character a little bit. He was renowned as being a wild man. Like he had like this uncontrolled, almost savage fighting style. He was very difficult to deal with in combat, and he was just like an attack dog. So he wants to balance himself out. He starts to realize that just hacking and slashing and just having that be his purpose in life isn't fulfilling.
So much more.
There's lots more. So he starts to learn about Zazen, which is Buddhist Zen meditation. And that is the classic imagery of, you see the guy sitting with his legs folded up in like a lotus position. That's where you cross your feet over each other, and they have the hands in the lap, and they just close their eyes and they just kind of chill. And that is the classic meditation, because he realizes he needs to center himself, and when you're not centered, when you're not focused, it can throw off everything in your life. But as a duelist, especially if he lets emotion run, you leave openings and it can get you killed.
Yeah, I've seen Star Wars.
You've seen Star Wars. Very good. Very good. It is very much like that. And interestingly enough, the old school Star Wars uses more classic Japanese sword styles, where it's like when Vader and Obi-Wan face off, that's like an old school, almost Japanese fight where they kind of like, they're sussing out whether the other guy is any good. And then there's not a huge amount of strikes, but then there's the killing blow. Because David Prowse, the guy who played Darth Vader, is a traditionally, formally trained sword expert. And he was like, yeah, this is how you fight. These guys, their duels were very similar. It's a ton of strategy, analyzing your opponent, and then you strike. You don't just charge in typically. Unlike Musashi, who's a lunatic, and everyone's like, ah! That's the sign of an untrained.
His techniques work so far.
So far, it's been going great. But he feels, especially if he wants to take on students, and now that he's 30, so he's getting older, and he's like, well, I can't just rely on brashness and rage and speed and strength all the time. There has to be a bigger strategy to it.
What else am I going to teach?
What else am I exactly? So he starts to, this is when he really starts to dabble in philosophy and trying to understand like the meaning of the duel, but then also trying to find like a higher purpose within it. Because he's thinking like, well, just fighting to kill somebody, there has to be more of a purpose to it.
Gotta be more.
Because he's finding this is a quest for perfection for him. It is a physical perfection, but now it's a mental perfection. He's like, well, I want to prove that my style is great, not just from a killing people perspective, but because swordsmanship is intrinsic in being a samurai, and it's part of like the warrior code, and it's part of you then. Your sword is symbolic of your soul. There has to be more than just murder. Like that's like a completely unfulfilling experience for him.
Yeah.
And he starts to find kind of the truth behind it. Like there's something very honest and true about the purity of combat. This is how he approaches it. Like when you're facing off against somebody, you really see them, and you really have to show yourself. Like it's a very deep approach, because you have to analyze everything about a person within a few seconds, like how well they move, if they have any tells, like a poker match kind of thing, you know, if they're aggressive, if they're relaxed, if
they have two swords,
if they have a giant sword. But he can tell, like he starts to try to figure out if there's like a path to finding out about character through that. And then if there's any kind of like overlap between this pure study of the sword and then these different styles of art in general. So he's starting to put some of these ideas together.
A Renaissance man.
He's trying to be. It's interesting because he's like, okay, so I've been a killer for all this time, but I think there's got to be an application beyond just the sword. But the sword for him, he's literally living on the edge. Like that's a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, but he lives and dies by his own skill and the skill of others. So this is a big deal for him, and he's starting to figure this out. And that was in 1611. So now in 1612, he gets approached for this duel. And whether Kojiro is a jerk and arrogant, which they're probably both arrogant.
Sure.
Because they've both been just walking around killing people. But he's really, like I said, Musashi is studying this meditative, self-effacing, like kind of trying to strip himself down to his core principles and analyzing things. He starts to add a little bit of a psychological component to his duels.
Oh, psych.
Yes. Now, they determine the rules of the engagement and where it's going to be. And they determine it will be on Ganryu Island, and it's going to be held at the Hour of the Dragon, which is 8 a.m.
It's early for a dragon.
It's early for a dragon. I feel like that's the hour of the sleeping dragon.
Yeah.
Although, lizard, he's just baking in the sun.
I guess.
What's going on?
Seems early.
I don't care.
Seems early.
Yeah,
All right.
it's still early.
Anyway, 8 o'clock.
So 8 a.m. They're supposed to meet on this island, which is kind of a desolate little rock. Closest translation I could find for Ganryu was Big Rock.
Big Rock.
But that was the Ganryu style of fighting, so that Big Rock style. And that is actually one of the things they call...
Big Rock style.
That's actually one of the things they call Kojiro, is Ganryu.
Oh.
Sasaki Ganryu, or Sasaki Kojiro. But I can only find like 1 or 2 sources where he's called Sasaki Ganryu.
Yeah.
Mostly he's referred to as this swallow, because of the swallow cut technique that he
move.
has.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find anything else about why they would call it the Big Rock. I think it's probably because this is where he has his most famous duel.
Oh, which we're about to hear about.
So he shows up early, and the local lord has said, no spectators. This is a private duel between adults. There will be no flashy... It's not going to be a big thing. The peasants don't care. The island is packed.
We came to see a duel.
A ton of people show up on little fishing boats. Local samurai show up. Some of the Ronin show up.
Yeah.
Students for both guys are showing up. Like, people from all over. This is like a football game. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, we got to watch this. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be the greatest swordsman in the country fighting. Classic old school style versus new school Musashi. The crazy two-hander and the crazy two-weaponer. This is going to be great. Let's see how this goes. 8 a.m. rolls by, and Kojiro's waiting. 9 a.m. rolls by.
Uh-oh.
Kojiro's waiting.
The hour of the slow dragon.
11, 12 o'clock.
How long do you wait? Just sit
No
there
Musashi. And he just says, what is happening? So he sends servants to find Musashi, who is asleep.
Oh.
He has overslept.
Well, that's
So
what
the
I was
servants are like, dude, you've got to duel. And he's like, oh, that?
That old thing?
Hold on. So he takes his time getting dressed, and then he has a full breakfast, which takes a while.
Sure.
Because they got to prep everything. It's not like he's like, I'll have a Nutrigrain bar and I'll be right there. He's, fry up some eggs. It's Japanese breakfast.
Yeah.
You got to prepare the rice. You got to prepare the fish. You got to, that's typically what they had, is vegetables. He's got courses. He has his meal, and he's like, okay, now I'm ready.
It's almost lunchtime, really.
Yeah, it is. And then he gets up and he goes on the boat. And on the way there, he's like half awake. He decides to take one of the oars, that like it's a spare oar, and he just takes out his knife and he starts carving it into a ludicrously large bowken.
Oh.
It's like he makes a sword.
Yeah, okay.
Now, I couldn't find anything that he actually brought his sword with him. So he might have just showed up with I think he just showed up with like a knife.
Okay.
He like didn't even bring a sword.
His Whitland knife?
So he's got it. He's just carving this stick. He's making a stick sword. Now it's an oar, so it's, like 5 feet long.
Yeah.
It's basically, he makes a nodachi out of a stick. So it's this big crude stick. And he shows up and he like walks on shore with this club. And Kojiro is livid.
Yeah, I would.
Absolutely furious. This is rude. This is disrespect. I have been here for hours so I can cut you in half.
I didn't have breakfast. You had breakfast.
Yeah, you ate. I ate and got up here early. I prayed. I did all my pre-fight ritual stuff. You've got all these people waiting, and Musashi's like, why are there people here? I thought you and I were supposed to fight and just die. I don't know what's going on. This is stupid. Calm down. And Musashi basically like, dude, chill. What's your problem? And then he's like, where's your sword? He's like, right here. Like, that's a stick. Yeah, that's all I need. So Kojiro gets so pissed off that he takes the scabbard for his nodachi. Now, scabbards for a sword in Japan are lacquered wood, usually with some kind of fancy inlay. It's not like in a medieval European sword, it's like a leather sheath that the sword goes into, and you're like, it's got a little metal tip and a little metal throat on it so you don't scuff up the leather.
Yeah.
These things are oftentimes a work of art.
Oh.
Lacquered wood is very difficult to make even nowadays. It takes a lot of polish, takes a lot of work. This apparently was a really fancy one, because when he whips it, and it's also huge because it's a scabbard for a giant death sword. He whips it into the ocean, just peeved. And Musashi's like, well, that was dumb. Why'd you do that? That was a really, really nice scabbard. And he's like, to show you that I'm not putting away my sword until you're dead.
Ooh, good move. Right.
And Musashi just goes, or you're not confident in your ability to use the sword and know it's never going to find its sheath again because I'm going to kill you.
Ooh, this is a
And then
highbrow trash
Kojiro's
talk.
like, I swear to God, I'm going to squish. Pull out your sword. So they square off. And this is the classic samurai showdown where they just kind of slowly pace around each other,
Yep.
change stances a little bit.
Yep.
Musashi with his stick, and Kojiro with his giant killing sword. And at almost the exact same time, they both strike.
Ooh.
Now, Kojiro starts off with his very famous swallow technique, where he chops down and he's going to chop up. He chops down, and I love to think of this as it's the classic, they run past each other, and you don't know who died,
Oh, sure.
right? And
Until
apparently...
one of them falls in half.
Yeah, exactly. So apparently what happened to Musashi is his headband got cut,
Ooh.
and like, whoop, falls off, and that's it. He, on the other hand, like their swords hit in midair and crash into each other, and Musashi just gets his headband cut, and his sword, his stick, splits Kojiro's skull basically in half. He just crushes his skull with a stick. One strike and they're done. It's over in like a half second. And everyone's like, ah! The crowd goes wild because what just happened? He showed up, and it's just amazing because Musashi knew he's fighting against an extremely deadly opponent. Yeah. And meanwhile, he's been studying all this philosophy. He's been thinking a lot about his own techniques, and he's like, I'm going to do everything I can to make this guy unbalanced.
Oh.
It's thought very much that he did all of this on purpose to throw him off his game.
Yeah.
Because he's trying out... Now, he probably could have just beaten him in a normal fight.
Sure.
The thought is...
But this way he got breakfast.
Possibly could have, but this way he got breakfast. And this guarantees a victory because it shows that the other guy was going to get unnerved. He was going to lose his patience, his demeanor. And as a swordsman, you can't lose your patience and your demeanor. And this becomes a foundational principle for Musashi from here on out, is that you have to always be calm.
Keep
inside.
it cool, boy.
You have to keep your stuff together because whether it's on the battlefield, and he starts to broaden out his tactics beyond just a sword, it becomes a thing that in the future people start using in the boardroom.
Oh.
Where it's, you have to maintain your calm.
Showing up late is a thing?
Yeah, that's like a power move. It's a total power move. He's like, I control the narrative. You're waiting on me now. Now you're off balance. It's a good version of the bit in The Office where Michael Scott's like, I'm declining to speak first. And the guy's like, you just spoke first. Did I? And it's a whole thing. Musashi shows up late. He doesn't have a sword. He's kind of like, his hair's kind of messy. He's just got like a headband on. He's in like basically just, he's kind of scrubby looking and disheveled. And this other guy is like a very proper samurai, and he gets crushed.
It's all an act.
And it's all an act. It's all the act. Sneaky. It's like a rope-a-dope, like Muhammad Ali's thing, where he's acting injured, he's playing around. It's to throw the other guy off his game. So Musashi learns from this a key lesson in being centered all the time. So while he seems, kind of out of it, or distracted, or tired, or lazy, he's always focused on what he's doing. Mm-hmm. He always knows what's going on. And he basically starts to tailor it for every opponent he deals with. Now, after this makes him the preeminent, solely number one swordsman in all of Japan now. He's killed everybody who's ever had to come up against him. He's crushed entire clans of swordsmen. He has ruined dojos. And so he decides to make his own. And he doesn't really like to be settled down. He's like, he opens a dojo.
Man about town. Yeah.
He trains some people. He starts to attract followers now because he beat Kojiro. He beat like the most famous guy in the West. And all right, he could do anything he wants. He starts to get bigger jobs. Toyotomi Hideyori, who is Hideyoshi's son. So Hideyoshi is the guy who won basically the giant warring states period. He's like the top guy. He was Nobunaga's like best dude, and he beats all these other lords, and he creates a new shogunate. So Hideyori is his son, and then eventually Hideyori and Tokugawa have a falling out, and then Tokugawa becomes the shogun. But for now, he's in charge, and apparently he's like, ooh, greatest swordsman alive. Come help me out.
Yeah.
He has a campaign. We don't know about what Musashi might have done during this. But he served probably as a soldier, because he wasn't a general. He was never put up as a general.
Okay.
But he might have been a blade just for hire. He might have just been an advisor. He might have been a bodyguard. We're not really sure what he did, but we know he's part of Toyotomi's campaign. This nets him an even bigger job. So from 1615 to 1621, he's set up as a construction supervisor. So you need a guy who is smart, who is capable, who is a good leader, who's good at telling people what to do, and managing supplies, distribution, all this. So this is a big job. This is a really important job. And you always put a samurai in charge of things, which shows that he's branched out now from
just killing people
to he's like, if you build
to
that
middle
way,
management.
it's going to collapse and everyone's going to die. So now he has a constant source of income. He has a job.
Nice.
He has a stipend.
About time.
He continues traveling again after this. He has more duels. He winds up adopting a couple sons over time.
Yeah.
That was a practice of you'd find somebody who you foster for a while and you're like, you're my formal son now. Sometimes you did that with a student who proved to be particularly skilled. Unfortunately, one of them commits seppuku when his lord dies. And he thought that was his failure. This is a very common practice among samurai is if my lord dies, I failed, so I have to die.
Yeah.
Others do something opposite of that where they'll avenge the lord. So it must have been something that he felt he needed to do. So this is sad for Musashi. He doesn't like that his son died, but it's considered honorable for him to do that. Now, in 1633, he really starts to lean into the other arts, not just martial arts. So he's fought everybody. He has fought spear masters like Gonosuke. He fought the Nodachi master, the Kojiro guy. He fought a guy with the Kusarigama, and he's beaten all these guys. He destroyed the Yoshioka clan, who were traditional swordsmen. He's tapped that, basically. He's kind of done with... He's done everything that he can as a swordsman. He still has duels after this, but he realizes he wants to be more of a complete person. So he starts to paint.
Oh, nice.
Here's some of his work.
Cool.
This one is called it's just a very simple name. It sounds way cooler in Japanese, but I'll butcher it. So it's just a shrike on a dead tree. So shrike is a type of bird. Okay. And it's part of this really neat style called sumie. And sumie just uses like shades of black and gray, and it's kind of, they use washes, and it's, you dilute the paint or the ink to do more or less color to make it more intense, and it's supposed to represent the purity of the piece, and it really leans into the Zen Buddhism concept of minimalism, but also seeing as much as you can see. His work is respected by actual, like, not just contemporary artists, but modern artists, because he has like very intense brush strokes. It's kind of just form, like what he sees, he just kind of does. There's not really like a special formality to it. Unfortunately, as the art became more popular, then there were like rules to it, and that kind of took the soul out of it.
He's not really a big rules guy.
He's not a big rules guy. He's his own kind of guy. But that was later on, after Musashi passed away, when the rules started to be more formal. So he's kind of like this is neat. I like. You might have seen it and just thought that's really cool. It's also really cheap art. Like it's you can live this Spartan lifestyle of what he believes in. You want simplicity. Mm-hmm. He doesn't believe in having like big extravagant shows of wealth. He thinks that kind of undermines you as a person, not just as a warrior, but as a person. Pursuit of wealth and all this stuff. So that's kind of why he never really settles down. There's all kinds of rumors about his sexuality, because he'd never settled down with a wife, and that was not common. But because he there are stories about how he pursued a few women. He had a few like famous love affairs. There's no anybody even suggesting that he might have been gay. So just because he didn't have sex,
except you just now,
right? Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, like contemporaries, nobody thought that was a thing, and it was not completely uncommon for men to take male lovers. Like that was a thing. Yeah. It's not like that was just made up recently. That's only in certain cultures. Mm-hmm. But I think what it really is he was just so focused on the sword, and that's all he wanted to do. So he had no time for relationships.
No time for love.
No time for love. His love was his art.
Right.
And that there's a lot of people throughout history who are like that, who are just like, yeah, sex is not my driving focus. It's, scientists who pursue like the astral bodies, and then swordsmen who pursue that, or, Michelangelo and Da Vinci. These guys were famous artists who they don't talk about their love lives really.
Yeah, man.
So I just thought that was a little interesting note, is that people were like, was he gay? And like, no, he just probably was just like one of those asexual type of people who's like, nah, I don't care. I just fighting and this and then this study of self. Well, you can't really do that when other people are around, especially not kids.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And because his lifestyle is traveling, it doesn't make sense for him to have a family. And this is how he likes to live. So he's just doing this and doing his own thing, which I think is awesome. The one time we know for sure he fought in a battle was during the Shimabara Rebellion. That was in 1637, December of 1637 to April 1638. So it was a real short thing. And he fought, and apparently he got knocked off his horse by a peasant who threw a rock at him. Not a really great battle.
Yeah.
I can only find one thing that talked about that.
Okay.
So that was maybe...
Okay.
Ow! Well, this is stupid. I'm not doing this anymore.
Stupid kid and rocks.
Just throwing rocks at me. Now, he was in his 50s when this happened.
Oh,
so,
even worse. Stupid kid
he's
and
like,
rocks.
no, I got osteoporosis and everything's broke. I don't like this. In 1643, he decides he wants to be a hermit. He just wants to...
Out.
I'm out. I don't want any more duels.
These darn kids with the rocks.
I don't want people to throw rocks at me. I don't want to be a warrior. And he decides to write all of his ideas into a single tome. In 1645, he finishes the Book of Five Rings, which is his amazing text, which I own and which is awesome.
Check it out.
And then he dies June 13th, 1645. So basically, he finishes the book and dies of what's thought to be lung cancer.
Oh.
Now, one of his lasting legacies, this guy fought apparently more than 60 duels and was never defeated, except for the one time that they think that nobody agrees actually happened.
And the one time a kid knocked him off his horse.
And
with a rock.
well, that wasn't a duel, that was battle. But yeah, we don't know what happened after that.
Kid thought it was a duel.
The kid's like, that was a duel. I won.
That counts.
And he's like, I'm still alive. It doesn't count.
Okay, I gotta go.
Come kill me with the rock, kid.
Mm-hmm.
Shwing. I got 2 swords. And the kid was like, I'm out. I retreat. So the Book of the Five Rings is really fascinating. He's got it's split by the elements. So there's earth, water, fire, wind, and then the 5th book ring is void.
Oh.
Void is supposed to be an absence of everything, and then also just like the presence of the mind and the presence of self.
Okay.
So each book talks about a different thing. The chapter about Earth is an introduction. It talks about martial arts and leadership and training. Training is building a house. You have to have a strong foundation from there. Okay. The Book of Water specifically describes his Niten Ichiru, or the 2 heavens, 1 style, is what it actually means. So Niten is each ni is 2, and 10 heavens. Talks about basic principles. The Book of Fire he talks about battle and timing, which shows how much he got into it.
Yep.
The Book of Wind is apparently something of a pun, because wind can also mean style, so he's being very clever. And it talks about his school versus other schools, why his is better, why theirs are worse. And then the Book of Void is his more conscientiousness and the mindset. It's his Zen stuff, which is actually it's a really good reading. So you can get that. This was not available until the 1970s in English, and once it was, all these business guys started reading it to understand Japanese business style, because this is like required reading. This, The Art of War, like these are big deals for a lot of Eastern businesses, and it's really fascinating. To this day, what's really cool is on May 20th, 2000, the Miyamoto Musashi Budokan opens, which is a school for all the different martial arts. And it specifically focuses on Kenjutsu, which is the sword style. It's right here. And that's in Japan. It's a really cool building. You can go there and see it. And that is the legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, and one of my favorite guys to talk about in history.
Well, look at that.
There we go. A little over an hour, but he's really cool.
There we go. Well, it's never too late to stop killing people and write a book.
Yeah.
Do some painting.
Maybe do some painting. I just like that. I like when they're like, maybe just killing people's not a great.
Yeah, well,
could do
more
more.
people started with the painting. All right.
Maybe.
Either way, that was fun to learn, and boy golly, check out the other one as well. The other story about the Battle of Sepagahara.
Yes.
Which I'm looking to. All right. Next week we're going to be discussing. We're going to England again, Europe.
France.
France.
Specific, like to start. It starts
There you
in
go.
France. Ends in England.
Eleanor of Aquitaine marrying Henry the
Second. Yep.
in May 1152.
Yep. King Richard's mom and dad.
Oh,
Yeah.
we'll learn about them.
We're gonna learn about them.
All right. If you
She's
have any
awesome.
comments or suggestions, put that in the comments section there.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe. Consider becoming a Patreon. And
Tune in next week.
tune in next week.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
And have a great day.
Careful out there with the duels.
Yeah. Be careful who you duel. Just don't do it. It's illegal right now.
Bye.
Bye.